brother. The Biden administration is trying to justify its totalitarian proposal to investigate every $600 transaction that goes in and out of bank accounts as simply a way of tracking tax cheats. That's what they say. In fact, it's less about tax cheats than it is a cheat of our Constitution's Fourth Amendment, which prevents the government from, quote, conducting searches of persons, houses, papers, and effects without probable cause. Now, unless Treasury Secretary Yellen can make the case to a judge that all 330 million Americans are probable tax cheats, she should lose this fight. But the IRS has a history of playing fast and loose with the concept of being innocent until you're proven guilty. And this takes that to a whole different level. Matt Walsh, the writer, describes the IRS proposal as, quote, a permanent IRS audit. But you can tell it's even more than that by the undisguised glee with which Democrats are pushing the idea. Ask anyone who works for a social media company how much a database tracking every $600 transaction in America would be worth. Then imagine how the government could cull politically priceless data about where your money's going and how it's being used. Reasonable folks worry that giving the government the kind of access to that information in our private lives could morph into a Chinese communist-style social credit system where political and economic decisions become intertwined and continuously scrutinized by government monitors. If you think that's too conspiratorial, just remember the Lois Lerner episode where political beliefs played a part in IRS decisions about granting tax-exempt status to organizations just before the 2012 elections. Now, some members of Congress believe that at the very least, the Biden's IRS proposal is unconstitutional and must be stopped. One of them is Congressman Drew Ferguson from Georgia, member of the House Ways and Means Committee, and he joins us now. Congressman, good to see you. Do we know who first came up with this proposal?
David, good to be with you today, and I, like every American, am furious at this proposal. We don't know where it came from, but I have a feeling it came from Nancy Pelosi, and this is something that every American is going to be outraged by, and they should fear it. Having the IRS look into your bank accounts without probable cause is unacceptable, and it's time for Congress to stand up and say no to this.
So what can we do to stop it, Congressman?
Well, David, I'm introducing a bill tomorrow to stop the IRS surveillance, illegal surveillance of America's bank accounts. It's a very simple bill. It just prohibits the IRS from doing this. And look, here's one of the real challenges with this bill right now is that it is going to be used as a pay for in their reckless scheme, their reconciliation scheme, to give a tax break to millionaires and billionaires in blue states. This is wrong. And look, David, it doesn't matter if the number is $1, $600, or $10,000. You cannot allow the government to look at your private property. These bank accounts are the property of the American citizen, and the IRS has no business snooping in there.
Are there any Democrats opposed to it that you know of?
I can't imagine that reasonable people on either side of the aisle would think that this is a good idea. And I think every single American, whether they're Republican, Democrat, whether they're moderates and independents, it does not matter. They do not trust the IRS to look at their bank accounts. Why would you need to do that? Are you saying that every single American is a tax cheat? The whole notion of closing the tax gap with this is ludicrous. This is wrong. It cannot be allowed, and we're going to stand up and fight
But
this.
Congressman, just to put a fine point on it, do you know, have you talked to any Democrat who opposes this?
Well, we're going to introduce this bill tomorrow, and we're going to ask Democrats to get on as co-sponsors as well. I can't imagine that they would want to go back home to their constituents in a district, whether it's a Republican, moderate, or Democrat district, and say, I support the IRS looking at your bank account. This is something Americans are going to be outraged about. I have not had a single issue since I've been in Congress that has had as much incoming attention coming into my congressional office as this one. 80,000 new IRS agents are proposed in this bill, a supercharged IRS with the ability to look at every single transaction, whether it's in your bank account, Venmo, Cash App, or any of the other electronic payment forms. is wrong, and I'm leading the charge to put an end to it.
Now, I imagine there are a lot of Democrats who are in favor of it, who were happy that it started at $600 and are going to try to negotiate with you. We've seen some people say, well, it's not okay for $600, but maybe somebody with a $10,000 account or so forth, that'd be okay. In fact, that could mean a lot of retired people that have accounts built up over the years who may have $10,000 or even $100,000. I don't think any American should be deprived of their right to privacy, whether they have $100 or $1 million in their account. Do you?
David, you're exactly right on this, and the number is irrelevant. This is a constitutional issue. It is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The federal government cannot go and take a look at your private property without reasonable cause. This is unacceptable. It's time for Congress to stand up and fight this.
Now, I'm wondering to what extent, and you can get conspiratorial on it, but you don't have to go too far to do that. We know a lot of Democrats, like Liz Warren and others, are in favor of a wealth tax, which they've tried, and it's failed, by the way, in just about every country that's tried it, and yet they're still for that. This is kind of laying the groundwork for it. To give the IRS open access to all the money coming in and out gives them more ideas about how much money you're worth. And if we get to that area where we have a wealth tax, this is kind of laying the groundwork as a mechanism to tracking people's wealth. Is that at all going on here?
I am sure Elizabeth Warren has motives that aren't in alignment with the Constitution or what the American public wants. But look, here's the thing that I worry about. I worry about the working man and woman out there, the marginalized communities, minorities that don't trust the banking system, Americans that simply don't trust the federal government. I worry about what's going to happen to them. And again, look at what they're going to use this money for that they find in your bank accounts. As they reach into the cushions of your couch and pull out your last dime, they're going to use it to pay for a tax break to lift the SALT deduction for millionaires and billionaires in blue states.
Yeah.
That in itself is hypocrisy like I've never seen before.
Congressman,
this is a constitutional issue.
You and I know that the amount of money that they're thinking of spending, whether it's $3.5 trillion or $5 trillion or even more than that, which will eventually be the case if they get any of these measures passed, they're going to need more than money from millionaires and billionaires. They're going to need the large middle class of America to pay a lot more money, whether it's through a value-added tax like they have in Europe or whatever. This is what's happening. They're taking aim at the middle class. It's not just the millionaires and billionaires. This is a direct aim at the middle class, is it not?
David, it is, and we have shown in the Ways and Means Committee, and the Republican side has shown that Joe Biden's promise not to tax people under $400,000 is an outright lie. Provision after provision after provision is hitting Americans making under $400,000 a year. And by the way, all of this spending is driving inflation to its highest recorded levels, and that's a tax on every single American.
Well, Congressman Drew Ferguson, please stay in touch. Let us know what happens with your efforts. We want to follow this very closely. Appreciate you being here. Well, of course,